could call it a midlife crisis, but it was too late in life to be described that way. What is it that drives a man in his 60s from the comfort of his couch to fighting the elements in 25 knots in a little tiny boat on the Great Sandy Strait? I had spent a lot of time and energy on chasing after material things, but those things were starting to lose their grip on me. A serious heart attack and a quad heart bypass in my 50s had driven me right to the abyss. But something was stirring within as memories scrolled through my mind, retrieved from my subconscious being. Some of them were like thoughts just swimming below the surface, but other things were much deeper down in the murky depths of my past. And so it was that this old fart, wearing a weather-beaten Akubra hat, struck out under full sail in a tiny little boat, confronting his demons on a tempestuous ocean. It was July 2018, and the contest was taking place on the Great Sandy Strait, south of Fraser Island in subtropical southeast Queensland. Moonlight is my 40-year-old clinker dinghy, and it's the perfect vessel for this rite of passage. She's surfing along beyond her hull speed at times. The ancient piece of hewn pine, which is the tiller, and the taut sheets connecting you to the elements in a way that only sailors know. I'm sensing this is a new beginning. Wounds that have been inflicted over the passage of time are already beginning to heal. A journey of significance had begun. Our world had literally fallen apart. At the age of 53, I had a heart attack and underwent quad bypass surgery. It was a miracle that I survived. In the ensuing years, our business failed and all our assets were stripped away. Then came my wife's battle with Parkinson's disease. PD is an insidious and evil thing, and it slowly erodes your quality of life. At that time I was totally devastated, and I was seriously questioning a lot of important things in our lives. And then, after months of recovery, I felt the first stirrings to reconnect with my love for the ocean in general and sailing in particular. This was the first of many dinghy cruising trips on the Great Sandy Strait, where I traversed the entire strait from north to south, enjoying some very invigorating sailing, some secret campsites and beautiful anchorages such as Fig Tree Creek, which is known for an enormous strangler fig, and Deep Creek, which was once a busy logging camp. Setting out from Inskip Point at the southern end of the strait, all the way up the western side of Fraser Island to Hervey Bay. I had my iPhone with me, recording some of the interesting moments, including close encounters with dingoes and exploring a World War II commando training camp. I discovered a love for creative storytelling and the opportunities that YouTube provides to record the narrative in a visual and exciting way. A number of people enjoyed those videos, so I pressed on with improving my cinematography skills, and today I've published over 200 such video stories. Well, long story short, we had a lot of things happen that led us to come back to Tasmania from the Sunshine Coast. So Moonlight is still up there on the Sunshine Coast, waiting for me to go up there and bring it back down to Tasmania. But while I still had Moonlight, another little boat called Mozart came along into my life, and she was a bit of a project. Spent about a year doing her up, and then we had a lovely time out there sailing around Great Sandy Strait and up and down various parts of the east coast of Australia, as far up as Yeppoon and out to the Keppel Islands. Mozart is a Sonata 6, and a friend of mine bought a Sonata 6 back in the 80s when they were first being made. So I had fond memories of sailing in the Sonata, and it was really fun to get back on the water and even enjoy some time with my mate on the Great Sandy Strait. in Mozart. Entering my 60s, I enjoyed the simplicity of dinghy cruising and rough camping, occasionally even sleeping on board moonlight. What I didn't enjoy was the intimate relationship with the mozzies and the sandflies. Nor did I find it all that nice to wake up on the floor of moonlight frozen in the shape of a pretzel. I needed a bit more space, so one day, even though I was not actively searching, that Sonata 6 caught my attention. She needed a fair bit of TLC, so for a while I engaged in my other passion for fixing up boats in what turned out to be a 12-month project. Dressed up in her Mozart livery, the ageing Sonata just presented beautifully. She afforded some creature comforts, mainly in that I could stretch out full length and sleep in comfort, and not to mention that it kept the rain off. Our ventures stretched out further afield, taking us up as far as Watumba Creek on the northern end of Harvey Bay, Fraser Island that is, opposite Harvey Bay, which was full of whales at the time, including majestic breaching humpbacks. We travelled up to Yeppoon and explored the Keppel Islands on the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. Well, I wasn't planning to sell Mozart, but someone who'd been following my journey drove down from Townsville and made me a realistic offer, so for a while I was without a larger boat again. And then the opportunity came up to restore a Sunmaid 20. She is a much heavier trailer sailor with a deeper keel and encapsulated ballast, ideal for some more adventurous coastal cruising that I had planned. You would have thought that I would have been wiser, but I underestimated the scope and the cost of restoring Saffron. Some of what I made my decisions upon were based on a survey which turned out to be completely inaccurate. Be careful of surveys. This took me off the water for 1.5 years now, but as my wife's health was deteriorating, she has PD, it enabled me to stay close to home while I completed the project in our front yard. The Sunmaid is a splendid little ship capable of handling a decent sea state in safety, but just when I'd completed a couple of shakedown trips in her, my life was suddenly disrupted again. They say that you don't need to go looking for a wooden boat, they find you. And this was certainly the case with Sarah Ann. It was totally serendipitous. You wouldn't believe how this story unfolded, and I suggest you check out the video Life Disrupted, because a boat built in the late 1960s by my mentor John Phillips suddenly turned up in my front yard on the Sunshine Coast, over 2,000 kilometres away from where she was hewn from Huon pine and King Billy pine. Now Sarah Ann just didn't belong in the subtropics, and I immediately resolved to return her to Tasmania for some fun and adventures. She went all the way to Queensland and back without even going for a sail. I spent a year getting her seaworthy, which included refitting her engine. This past summer was amazing. I had many opportunities to explore the rivers and estuaries of Tasmania, including the Tamar and the Huon. And right now, she's back in the shed, and I'm doing some urgent repairs and completing her restoration. Sarah Ann was a shed find, having languished for much of her 53 years. So as I press on with the repairs and the preparations, there's a vacant mooring waiting for Sarah Ann at Ajo's place on Clarence Point at the mouth of the Tamar River. I'm planning on leaving her there over the winter, as it's a great place for some winter sailing on sheltered waters. And strange as it may seem, I started thinking about my next boat. And I'd been looking at some H28s and thinking, well, yeah, they're probably within my grasp, and how would I get enough money together to grab hold of one of those to go on some serious cruising later on? But just formative ideas. And then I was sitting, as it was, in church this morning, and I was thinking, I don't need to worry about my next boat. Sarah Ann found me. My next boat will also find me. I'm struggling to believe this, but it wasn't 5 minutes later that my next boat found me. And in a week's time I'm going to pick up something rather interesting and exciting. It's been several months since I've been able to get back to this. First step is to make the thing a bit more weather tight. So I've got this tarp across the front here because we get some pretty strong winds where we are, 25 knots on the way. Well, this workshop looks like a bomb's gone off in it. All ready to go. Next time I come into the workshop, I'll start working on the boat. I've made it as far as the boat. It's like excavating a mine. Onto some boat work. All right, let's get some light on the situation. That's a good start. So this is how she was when I last pulled her out of the water. As you can see, very squeezy in here. And I noticed that as it's been sitting here, it's been quite damp. This is plywood with just deck paint over it, so I'll sand that back and give it a bit of a feel. This is canvas. I've got to get rid of all this off the deck. The pulpit is good. I've been getting a bit of a leak down this side, and that's critically important, especially at this time of year, because you don't want your sleeping bag getting wet. Now, the pad eyes that I put on here, wrongly positioned, however, this one can stay, the tweaker will work there, but this one here needs to go outboard a bit. Eliminated the need for a track. Where do I start? The other thing I've got to do is remove the shrouds and tie them all up there so they're out of the way. And suddenly found that the shroud was flapping, so I find that the split pins are far less likely to get ripped out. Never had a split pin ripped out, but I have had those little wire keyring style ones drop out of the clevis pins. We're in business. Drop that. And there's the forward one. So these are the type of rings that I'm talking about that I've had fail. Now I do use them on the forward shroud because that does have to come on and off in order to raise and lower the mast. Still not happy with them because that little hook there catches in your shroud, in your flapping sheets, and straightens that out and pulls it straight out. However, hasn't happened yet with this one, and I'm thinking that if it did, you've got forward and rear shrouds and you've got a forestay, so if it did, it'd be unlikely that you'd end up losing your rig. Someone who's got a better idea, very open to suggestions. Yeah, don't have to walk far to get my tools, that's the good side of it. And then I'll get a few other things suspended from the ceiling because I need to get the sails and all sorts of clutter out of the boat. But what I have got is a nice high roof. Oh, I got the hip. That's always going to be a challenge. Oh, a permanent bruise there on the thigh. Keep it up there nice and dry. And every now and again I get pleasantly distracted by my grandkids who are trying out their billy cart that I made for them. So I'm going to start at the stern, and first thing I've got to do, gee, that's interesting, that wasn't it. And it's not cutting in when it needs to cut in. So it's a little bit of an ordeal taking all that stuff out, but I'm going to. So I'll take this off to give myself easy access. I'll lift the battery out, I'll put it on the bench where I can put on the charger for a while. And while I can lift this out because it's just bedded down into butyl mastic, I intentionally didn't screw that down and attach it to the hull. And that will give me access to the float switch. Almost I don't want to get started because I know what this leads to. There's rumbling going on down here in the bilge. It's mainly me grumbling because I've been fiddling around with the bilge pump and the float switch and trying to get them set up in a way that the float switch actually turns on and off automatically as it's designed to do. The problem is, the place where I can fit the float switch is aft of the bilge pump, which means the bilge pump's sitting a bit higher than the float switch. And so I thought, well, I'll lift the float switch up a little bit, and that should be enough to get it turning on and off. Well, it didn't work. Lifted it every 3/4 of an inch, and I thought that'd be fine. But electrically it works, you know, if you manually move it up and down it turns on and off. But it's the position of the bilge pump itself isn't sufficiently low in the bilge, right down on the keelson, to actually fully drain and allow that float switch to turn off. So therefore it'll turn on and then it just keeps running. The float switch is down here and the bilge pump is there, and I did lift that float switch up 1/2 an inch or 3/4 of an inch. Still not sufficient, so the only thing I can do now is remove that bilge pump from there, shorten this hose and remove the bilge pump from where it is. I'll put the float switch right up there, and I'll put the bilge pump right down here. I'm hoping to get a bit more consistent in producing these videos. Family health issues and a few other things have really prevented me from seriously focusing and committing to these weekly videos that I want to be putting out. But come back and hopefully in about a week or two I'll have a really exciting venture to show you about the next boat.